Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me okay, and you can see my face on the screen. Welcome to what is our seventh webinar in this series now, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to listen in. And my name is David Beattie, and I've been with Booster for 24 years now, mainly involved in the investment management side of the business and providing support to our financial advisors, which also includes retirement planning advice. So the topic of retirement is now especially close to my heart because I'm literally only 1 month away from becoming a pensioner, which is an interesting concept to try and wrap my head around. So just a quick disclaimer before we start the session topics today. I'm going to be providing sort of general advice to as many people as possible. So it's important that we acknowledge that. And if you want more specific advice to take account of your own personal circumstances, then we would highly recommend you get in touch with one of the financial advisors who we have some connections and relationships with. And if you don't have one at the moment and you haven't spoken to one, by all means get in touch with us and we can put you in touch with the nearest financial advisor to you. Also, just a reminder that with the advisors who we work with, they are happy to provide free KiwiSaver advice to you as part of that service. If you wanted to explore things beyond that, then that'll be a negotiation between the two of you in terms of how much that might cost. But if you just wanted to get some initial advice regarding your KiwiSaver and settings, etc., our advisors are happy to provide that to you at no cost. So take advantage of that if you haven't already. Okay, I'm going to disappear video-wise from your screen so you can concentrate on what's in front of us. So let me just go through the agenda that I'm going to cover today. So as you know, it's all about understanding and tackling debt. It's a little bit different topic from what I normally cover in the previous 6 webinars, which have generally focused more on broader retirement planning topics. So today, we're definitely going to focus in on debt, and I'll give you a bit of a summary of the topics that I'm going to cover. We'll have a look at the difference between good debt and bad debt. Not all debt is created equal, and it's really good fundamentally to understand the difference between the two. We'll have a look at budgeting and why it's important to the whole debt management area to have a budget, and ideally also an emergency fund. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm going to take you through some strategies that you might want to try if you haven't already. This is a fairly broad topic, so we're trying to cover in about 15 minutes what could take about 15 days if we wanted to. So I'm trying to give you some indicative ideas there that you can take some action steps with, and I'll try and summarize a plan of attack for you once we've gone through the webinar that you might want to try and follow after this. And then right at the end, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask me some questions. There's a Q&A part of the webinar where you can just type those in. So as you're listening to me and you've got any questions, just pop them in there, and then we'll try and deal with as many of those as we can when we get to the end. Look, unfortunately, there's no magic wand that can be waved to get rid of debt problems, if that's how you're thinking about them. Deep down, I suspect many of you actually already know what some of the potential solutions are, but you may just be feeling either a little bit overwhelmed, or you don't know where to start, or you just need some help formulating and sticking with a plan. So again, well done for taking the time to listen today. I hope you find it useful, even if I actually end up doing nothing more than simply validating what you might already have been thinking and just needed the spur of today to get you underway. So let's start with good debt versus bad debt. And again, I suspect you all probably intuitively do know the difference between good debts and bad debts. But a good test is to think about what you're buying with the debt or what you have bought and how the value of that you've bought is likely to change into the future. And the general principle is good assets will typically go up in value over time, and bad assets, in other words, liabilities, don't go up in value. Probably in terms of the sort of broad pictures that I've highlighted there, student loans typically sits on the good debt side of the ledger. I know sometimes these can be viewed as liabilities, but they rightly sit on the good side of the ledger, not only because they should be adding value personally in terms of the capacity to generate higher income earning potential because you've enrolled in a higher education, but also typically because the interest rates on student loans, certainly in New Zealand, is actually zero. So they tick that good debt box from both of those perspectives. So understanding good versus bad is a key to prioritizing which debts to pay off first often. So generally, anything on the right-hand side, obviously, starting with those which are typically charging the higher interest rates. And in order of what we've got in front of us there, typically payday loans are charging the highest interest rate, followed by the credit cards and then hire purchase and car loan style loans. Budgets and emergency funds. Look, the cold hard reality is that if you're serious about tackling debt, you must have a budget. It's pretty much compulsory. It doesn't have to be a sophisticated budget. And on the next slide, I'll take you through what I think is a relatively easy sort of budgeting guide process that you can adapt to your own personal circumstances. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. Now, whilst emergency funds are not mandatory, I can't really stress strongly enough how useful they are to act as what I call the fence at the top of the cliff to stop getting into those sudden debt situations because you've had an unexpected expense pop up. And as a guide, it's easier said than done. If you are able to focus a little bit on having an emergency fund to deal with those unexpected emergencies, you probably need to be aiming for around 3 to 6 months of your net income in that fund. And that'll make a huge difference to help avoid having to take out one of those bad debts in the first place. And I'll just add that when it comes to looking at budgets and having an emergency fund, the Booster Savvy debit card potentially offers you a great way to help with both of those because they have as well as being a debit card itself, which pays a daily interest rate on money in there. It does have an inbuilt budgeting tool that is very, very useful, and also through the use of some of the stacks and different funds that you can put into the card. It's a great way of setting up an emergency fund saving routine and pattern in there, which provides a little bit of a disciplined way of doing that. So I won't say any more than that. If you're interested in the Booster Savvy card, if you haven't already got one, then just get in touch with us. So let's have a look at some of the strategies that I think are potentially useful for you to consider if you're not already using them. There are a lot of budgeting tools out there. I tend to like to try and keep things relatively simple. So one budgeting guide that I find is quite a good way to start is what they call the 50-30-20 rule, whereby in a nutshell, 50% of your net income should be going towards the things that you need, 30% towards the things that you want, and then the remaining 20% to savings. Now, that looks like a fairly hard ask, I know, particularly the last part, to allocate 20% of your net income to savings. So it can be quite useful. These are just guides, and it's depending on your own personal situation, you can tweak these a little bit. So, for example, the 50% on needs could be anywhere between 40 and 60% as a guideline. And the sort of things that typically fall under this category are the payments that you absolutely must make, like your rent or mortgage payments, your basic groceries to live, insurance and healthcare needs, your core utilities, power being one of them, but I've put in there basic Wi-Fi. We're not talking about ultra fast broadband if you don't really need it. And then, your minimum debt payments and any other contracted loans you've got, hire purchase, etc. So those sort of things that fit into the 50% needs category. Then into the wants, probably feeling self-evident, but typically all in there is clothing, although obviously some basic clothing must go into the needs category. So it's more discretionary clothing, anything to do with entertainment, which includes your subscriptions to your Netflixes, etc., going out for dinners, takeaways, all that sort of stuff, vacations, any other gadgets and bits and pieces that you spend money on. So that's sort of typically the wants category. And then finally, in the last part, the savings and debt payments includes the emergency fund and any debt repayments that you are able to make beyond the minimum that we've identified above, which fall into the needs category. So again, this is probably the toughest part of what you need to do. Whenever someone mentions budgeting, people's eyes typically roll over. And it's going to be particularly tough if you sort of do this exercise and you find that your ratios are nowhere near the 50, 30, 20. Just to give you a bit of an idea so that you're clear on the mathematics. I've just grabbed a quick example here of somebody on a $70,000 gross income. The tax will be 15,000 odd on that. So the net income is 55,000. So your needs budget, I guess a guide would start off at half of that, 27,500, which is about $530 a week. The wants budget's 16,500 or 300 and something dollars a week, and then your debt payments are the rest. As I said, when you go through this exercise, it'll be a bit tough. It could be a bit of a wake up. You look at that and go, well, I'm nowhere near 20%. My needs constitute 70%. So as a starting point, if you're stretched in some areas, start with maybe 60% of the needs, 25% in the wants, and then maybe 10 or 15% in the savings, or even if 10 is all you can do, even 5% in the savings, and then allocate things. You're starting. You've got to have obviously a non-zero positive number in that savings debt payment part of the budget to make any meaningful inroads into outstanding debts on top of what you've already committed to. So it's the toughest part, as I said, but also I'd like to just reassure you, for those of you who've done budgets, I've been a serial budgeter most of my life. It is also the most rewarding. If you can be a bit tough on yourself and find ways to bring your spending close to that sort of ideal area, it's a very rewarding exercise if you can crack it. And as I said, if you're serious about trying to get on top of it, you really have no choice but to get some sort of budget in line. I know there are, depending on your personal situation, again, if you're struggling in this area, there are budget advisors who offer their services out there in the marketplace, many of whom will do that for you for no charge. And so the financial advisors we deal with will probably be able to point you in the right direction if you don't know where to start on that. Okay, so that's the first sort of strategy area. Budgeting is crucial. Again, if you're struggling with how to be disciplined and or a little bit brutal with your spending, there are some great websites out there. This is one that my son actually pointed me towards quite a few years ago, and I particularly like it. It's got some great inspiration, motivation, and ideas that you can possibly think about. When I opened it up, I realized that I hadn't even thought about half of the potential ways of saving money and being brutal. It is tough when you read through it, but if you're just wanting to get some ideas about how you can save some money and get that budget on track, it's a fun way to start. Okay, some more tough love. The golden rule of credit cards. If you don't or cannot pay off the full outstanding balance on your credit card each month, then I would strongly suggest you should cut it up. It's as simple as that. Not paying the full amount each month is really going to provide you with some difficult challenges, because you're probably aware that the interest rate on credit cards is between 20 and 25% per annum, and that's brutal. So you really have to be tough on yourself and have a good look in the mirror and think about how you're using that credit card. I know it's easy to use it, but again, if you're going to be serious, if you're not paying it off, I would strongly suggest you literally take the scissors out and cut it up. If you're still struggling with paying off, your high interest debts, I just wanted to say it is okay to take a temporary KiwiSaver contribution suspension. Now, in an ideal world, you want to ensure you're still paying the minimum amount to get the free government contribution. So ideally, you still want to be putting in $1,000 a year somehow, $20 a week, to get that $500 odd from the government each year. But again, if at the expense of, you've got two choices: you keep contributing to your KiwiSaver, or you're still struggling with paying off that credit card, or even worse, the payday loans. I wouldn't stress too much about actually taking a full KiwiSaver contribution suspension if you have to prioritize paying off that credit card. That is a more important priority for you than missing out potentially on a little bit of government contribution if you're being charged 25% interest. I would emphasize the word temporary suspension. Sometimes these things can become permanent, but I know some of the advice is, you've got to keep your KiwiSaver going for as long as possible, but not at the expense of high interest rate debt that you've got out there. So I'm giving you free license to suspend your KiwiSaver contributions if you need to. And it's important that you get on top of that high interest rate debt, particularly the credit cards. If you have a mortgage, another way that you can potentially accelerate paying off those high interest rate debts again is to see if you can renegotiate a longer term with your mortgage provider. Sometimes there's a natural way of doing that. If you switch the bank that you're using to provide the mortgage, that's an opportunity to restructure that. So that enables you to reduce your monthly payments, and you can use the saving difference to increase your repayments on your high debt levels. And then likewise, when you reach the age of 65 and you can access your KiwiSaver, and with interest rates now where they are, up around 6, 7, 8% for mortgages, and other debts will be higher than that. It is now, given that, generally good advice to use your KiwiSaver once you can access at age 65 to pay off any outstanding debts. But obviously, ideally, this has all been planned for in advance, and you have put together a plan that gives you perfect alignment with how much you've accumulated in your KiwiSaver account and how much debt you have outstanding. But generally speaking, it is normally a good idea to pay off those debts with your KiwiSaver accumulation once you reach the retirement age and you've got access to it. And in previous webinars, I have touched on the subject of how much positive financial difference you can achieve by literally delaying your working retirement date, even by a year or two once you reach age 65. If you are able to, and you've got physically can do it, and your employer allows this to happen, then keep working for another year or two, and you literally would direct all of your new fortnightly pension payments that you get from the government to just accelerate any debt repayments. And it's incredible how much of a difference that makes with the current superannuation payment rates for Kiwis. The single amount I think is $26,000 per annum after tax. The couples rate is up around $37,000. So that can make a material difference on your debt repayments if you can just defer that when you actually need to get hold of your pension payments. So that's 20 odd minutes of a brief whiz through some thoughts and ideas about debt management and repayments. I've got a bit of a suggested action plan to take away with you today. So if you haven't already, you might have your own approach, but if you haven't used anything, have a crack at that 50, 30, 20 or some modified version of that to set up your first draft budget. You might be in for a bit of a rude shock, but you've got to start there and get a bit of a sense of where you sit in relation to that. Then obviously, once you've done that, you'll probably need to identify where you need to adjust your spending activities in line with that, and only you will know where those are. Might be a good idea to, once you've done that, to give yourself just a quick slap around the face and just commit to it, because this is a tough thing to do. And sometimes you need some sort of circuit breaker to do that. And maybe that's all it needs, just a quick self-directed slap around the ears and go for it. You've got to obviously identify those bad debts and focus on those ones, particularly your credit card area. Hopefully not too many if you've got payday loans. They are really tough. If you need to do it, make a thing of it, have a credit card cutting up ceremony if you need, and embrace the freedom that will potentially give to you. And then think about whether you can prioritize an emergency fund. It's an ideal situation to allow you the freedom to think about not having to worry about the next unexpected expense you have, whatever that might be. And then finally, again, if you haven't already, not a bad idea just to use a financial advisor to discuss some of these areas, but definitely to finalize your retirement plans, which are all sort of part of this whole area of getting to that magic age of 65 debt-free, and having the plan to how that might work from a longer term saving perspective is useful to do. And in that regard, the other 6 webinars we've done have all been focused on retirement planning. So there's a lot of useful information there if you haven't already dialed into any of those. And then, finally, just before we get to the question stage now, if you want to get the links to those previous retirement webinars, just contact us and we'll provide them for you. Although I think, having dialed in today, you'll probably get a confirmation email in the next few days, which will have a link to those anyway automatically. So just watch out for that email and you'll be able to dial into those and watch them. They're only about 15 or 20 minutes for each one, and hopefully there's some good information there. All right, so now question time. I'm going to reappear and see if I can identify where all the Q&As are. Yeah. Q&As, here we go. Alrighty, so starting off, so we've got Nigel putting 10% of salary into KiwiSaver is classed as savings. Yes, I would, for the purposes of this exercise, but the but is you wouldn't want to be doing that if you've got high interest paying debts. So anything on that right-hand side, make sure that you're not dealing with those while you continue to put your 10% of salary in. But if you don't have, you're paying off your credit card, you don't have any, significant high purchase agreements where the interest rate is being charged on those. A lot of HPs are interest-free for a period of time, but they can catch people out because they're not paying them off fast enough. So if you haven't got any of those, no loans on cars and payday loans, then certainly that 10% is classified as savings. Got a few thank yous, so thank you to those thank yous. Got a question here from Janet. Husband and yourself are self-employed, both paying secondary tax on the pension. Do you get the same amount each, or is it reduced overall? So if you once you both qualify for the pension, then there's what they call there's a married couple rate. So it's just a combined total amount, and it is reduced for two people. There's an assumption that you have some uh, lifestyle savings because two of you are living in the same house. So not surprisingly, they've decided rather than paying two people the two amounts that there's a married couple rate. Let me keep scrolling down here. Someone's asked Angel, at what point would it be worth increasing KiwiSaver increments? I assume that this means your contribution rates. Sort of further to my answer to Nigel's question, if you don't have any high interest rate debt on the right-hand side of that ledger, then increase your KiwiSaver now, your contribution rate to the maximum that you can possibly do. Nigel's talked about a 10%. I see that as an absolute minimum if that's your only saving capacity, and putting that away at 10% is great. But anything more than that. So there's no right or wrong time to start. Do it now if, as I said, you're able to do that within your budget. Someone has a revolving credit mortgage that is paid off. Relinquish this account. I've got a revolving credit mortgage that is paid off as well. I've just left that there. It's not costing anything. There's no sort of facility fee. So my general advice would be you may as well leave it there. Also taking ownership of your house. I'm not quite sure what question you're intending in there, but yeah, maybe you can clarify that before we leave. Let me just carry on. Someone here's close to paying off their mortgage. Going revolving credit facility. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, revolving credits are great for people who can be disciplined. The danger with them is that they're very easy to access, but they are great. And obviously they're typically on a floating rate. So the floating rates at the moment are quite high. So you got to be fairly disciplined with them. But so you know yourselves from a personal perspective how disciplined you can be. With them sitting there, as I said, the danger is you look at them and go, oh, would it be nice to just draw down on that and spend it on X, Y, or Z. So it comes down to personal circumstances. Poor Janet's asked the big hurly question: how much savings do you need to have before you finish work? It all comes down to your personal situation. I would suggest, Janet, that you talk to a financial advisor, and use our My Money Map retirement planning tool. It's freely available on our website as well. So if you've got your KiwiSaver with us, I'm assuming you do, go on, have a look at My Money Map, and that'll take you through a process of telling you literally how much money you will have when you finish work, assuming that's say 65, and then it'll tell you how much income that will generate, and then you can work out whether you think that number is enough. And if it's not, then you can play around with some of the inputs, and it'll iteratively work out, okay, so if I increase my contribution rates by 1%, this is the difference it'll make. So you can I would suggest have a play around with that, and the answer, Janet, will come up hopefully for you. There's some specific questions about HP deals and whether you can increase your payments. Yeah, I haven't done an HP deal for a while, so I'm not 100% sure. I suspect if you go back to whoever you've got that with, that there is capacity to negotiate higher payments. If not, then save the increased payments that you would like to be able to give them into an account, and then when it gets to the end of the deal, use that to pay it off as another alternative if you can't deal with that at the time. Someone's just clarified about the pension single person after tax. I believe so. It depends on your individual tax rates. If you go onto the MSD website. You can get all the answers for exactly how much the single person pension is, depending on your marginal tax rates and whether you've got other income as well. Yes, Janet, you can continue paying into your KiwiSaver once you go past 65. Whether your employer continues to top up, match your contributions as well, is up to them. They're not compelled to do it by law once you turn 65, but I would suggest that most decent employers will probably keep doing that for you as well. There's an anonymous person. I have tax that I owe with interest on top plus credit card debt. So tax with interest on top plus credit card. I would go with the credit card. I don't think the IRD are charging anywhere near the rate of interest that credit cards do. So I would go with credit cards first. Someone's asked a question that's not quite clear on suspending KiwiSaver. I suspect you're probably trying to go, where do you go to suspend that? Talk to us. If you've got it with us, just talk to us direct and the team here will point you in the right direction. Also, Tracy's going, we have to keep the revolving credit facility for 2 years. Yeah, as I said, I think I've hopefully given you enough details on revolving credits. They're great for people who can be disciplined. Do I have any suggested percentages for insurance other than house car contents? The silly answer is no, I don't. It's again down to your individual personal circumstance, I think, Anne. Again, your financial advisor can sort of help you out on that. They can also look through all of your insurance situation and determine whether you've got too much or too little. Janet, again, you're very active. Does KiwiSaver pay it all at once when you turn 65, or do you get regular payments? It's a choice. It's totally up to you. It's very flexible. You can take out as much or as little as you want, and you can set up regular payments with us as well. Can you access KiwiSaver for emergency fund to pay for a funeral? The answer is unfortunately no, unless you can prove that you have got a significant financial hardship, unfortunately. And the hurdle on that is quite high. Joanne, jobless unexpectedly. Sorry to hear about that. Using some payout, second house, suspended KiwiSaver contributions. Yeah. Yeah, so you've suspended them. It does make sense, I think, to put in that minimum $1,000 a year to at least get the 520 from the government. And then on top of that, again, it's going to come down to your budget and what your personal situation looks like now that you've had a bit of a change in circumstances. So I hope that helps. Funeral policy worth taking out versus contributing to a KiwiSaver. Look, it's an interesting little area. I think most people get caught out by funeral expenses because it takes quite a lot longer than people imagine to work through estates and getting probate and getting a payout. It's somewhere between 6 to 12 months, depending on how complex the estate is. So somebody has to stump up often to pay for the funeral costs, and that's not easily done. So I think it is worthwhile having a look at taking out some funeral insurance cover for that reason. Gary's asked some questions about the student loans. So it's taking up 12.5% of your wages. Okay. Yeah, would it be better to reduce your KiwiSaver contributions and use that to pay into the student loan? Oh, the risk-free rate of return is 12.5%. Not quite sure what you mean by that. So it's interest-free on the student loan. That's the reality. If you're able to just live with that, it's interest-free, and paying money into KiwiSaver, that's earning a positive rate of return. So over the longer term, if you can deal with how much of your wages that you're not getting, it's certainly doable, but if you're struggling with that, then you just have it's a personal thing you have to look at and say, look, I'm going to have to direct my KiwiSaver contributions to paying off the student loan faster because I don't want to struggle with that for the rest of my life. So again, it's a personal thing, but generally speaking, interest-free loans are great interest-free loans. So yeah. Look, we're sort of there's a few more working past. I'm near the end of them now. Um, Someone's asked a question on tax rates, which I'm going to have to probably pass on. It's either yes, a question for the IRD or the MSD. There might be Mr. Google might have to help you out on that one, Anna. Okay. There's a few more thank yous. There's one final question here. Is KiwiSaver only paid out after probate, even if it's stated in a last will? Yes. I've discovered that myself. KiwiSaver forms part of the estate. I think there's a minimum level though. I think if it's less than a dollar amount, and I can't think of that number off the top of my head, but I think if it's less than, don't quote me on this, and you could probably check it on the website under KiwiSaver. I think if it's less than 10,000, then it can be paid out earlier or five. But certainly if it's more than that, then it becomes part of the estate and it's only paid out after probate. But worth looking into just for that. But generally speaking, yeah, you have to wait.